Hello and welcome to a very special roundtable discussion here on the Polymath World channel. We're joined by some of the best science communicators on the internet who all have one thing in common: they're hated by creationists. And among other things, we're going to find out who has probably been told they're going to hell the most. I imagine that's you, Dave, though. You probably win the going to hell plaudits.
Yeah, they're not too explicit, but that's definitely the talk behind the curtain. Yeah.
Yeah, we're celebrating here, celebrating the centenary this month of the Scopes monkey trials. So I thought it would be very fitting. Cheers to you, gentlemen, to toast 100 years of court cases, 100 years of nonsense and battles between religion in schools taking the place of science. Why on earth today we're asking, is creationism still seeming to thrive, and what can be done about it? And I can't think of anyone better to talk to than the guests we've got here today. So I'll start with you, Dave. Why don't you introduce yourself and your channel and the noble work that you do?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Dave Farina. I run a channel called Professor Dave Explains. I started out really with the intention of just providing academic tutorials for students, to help pass their classes. But then around 2019, 2020, started to get into debunking content, first through Flat Earth, but then quickly evolved, ironically, into debunking creationists and many other flavors of pseudoscience. So creationism definitely has been one of the primary things that I've been focusing on, and especially Discovery Institute, the most elevated form of this type of propaganda, right? Not necessarily, you can go after raving preachers, your Kent Hovind types like that, but ultimately it's this creationism in a tuxedo, which is in the intelligent design movement, stemming primarily from Discovery Institute in Seattle. That's I've just been going down their roster. Actually, recently revived the playlist last week, thanks to some lies from Casey Luskin, and I'm back on their tails. So.
Yeah, I frequently pointed people in that direction. The playlist you've done on that is the best work on the internet. No offense, Phil or Dan, on that in particular. And I noticed as well, you've done a very long form discussion on creationism in general, which is also an excellent resource that we'll copy into the notes for the episode.
Yep.
Phil, introduce yourself and your work.
So my name's Phil Halper. I'm a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society. I was journalist in residence at the Penn State Institute for Gravitation and the Cosmos. I'm also the author of the book, Battle of the Big Bang, New Tales of Our Cosmic Origin, which is published by University of Chicago Press. And but I have a YouTube channel, which is my name, Phil Halper. And I used to call myself Skydive Phil, but that was when I wanted to stay anonymous, but I'm out with my real name now. And I actually got into all this because of evolution. So although most of my stuff is on cosmology, one of the first things I ever did was engage with a Muslim creationist called Adam Dean. And there's a very interesting saga that happened there. So definitely ask me about it. I've also debated anti-evolutionists like Sabor Ahmed. Dave and I have both engaged with Sabor. So yeah, I mostly do interviews with scientists and philosophers. I also have a regular show called the Sci-Fi Show, where I have Alex Malpass, a philosopher, and Dan Linford, another philosopher, but he specializes in philosophy of science, and we sort of go over claims of various creationists and similar types.
Yeah, and you did a very interesting video recently with Sir Roger Penrose on Stephen Meyer's claims on the cosmology front. Can you tell us a little more about that?
We just released that a few days ago. So basically, Stephen Meyer, he makes the argument for God based on a number of different things. Some of them I'm not sure are consistent, but he claims the Big Bang was the beginning of time. So that sort of relates to what's called the Kalam cosmological argument. It's an argument for God trying to use the Big Bang to prove God's existence. And he also has the fine-tuning argument. And then he has obviously material related to intelligent design, which is where he's sort of most at home, and the origin of life. So, of course, the thing is, what our book is about actually is the fact that most cosmologists don't think the Big Bang was necessarily the beginning of time. That is an outdated view. In fact, we did a survey of physicists at a leading conference. It was a very prestigious conference at the Copenhagen, well, Niels Bohr Institute, but it was so large they had to have it at the Black Diamond building in Copenhagen, which is like a big theatre. So, and it was multidisciplinary, disciplinary, and so I thought great opportunity to survey physicists about what they thought about controversial topics. So we talked about fine tuning, and believe it or not, only 3% of physicists thought that intelligent design explains fine tuning, which is less than the number of physicists generally polled who believe in God. So even those who believe in God don't buy into fine tuning, according to the results of our survey. But the other thing is that we asked them what they think the term Big Bang means. And overwhelmingly, in fact, it was the only topic that got a majority vote on anything, because we had things about dark matter and quantum gravity and stuff like that. So the only thing where there was more than 50% agreement was the Big Bang should not be understood as the beginning of time. But of course, now Roger Penrose has proposed a cyclic model of cosmology. And it's a controversial topic. I don't want to claim Penrose is right. But what was interesting is I watched Stephen Meyer's video on it, and it seems like he just misunderstood it left, right, and centre. He just didn't have a clue what he was talking about. So I thought, who better than go and correct his claims than Roger Penrose himself? And I know Roger quite well. So I went up to Oxford, I played him the clips, and he was literally laughing at the claims or going, I have no idea what he's talking about. And so that was a lot of fun. And if people want to see a takedown of this intelligent design guru, Stephen Meyer, in the field of cosmology, come to my channel, Phil Halper, and take a look.
This is something you've done very successfully as well, Dave, sort of going to the primary source material that they have either misread, misunderstood, or flat out messed with. And that's kind of a big tell. I'm a scientist, and I find it very difficult to stay on top of the primary literature. But if you're an evolutionist, you seem to have to hate all of science. Everything from geology to astronomy to physics to chemistry, which is your background, anthropology. Yeah. I don't know how you even do that. So what's up with this? How can you sort of fight against all science and yet keep coming back like these guys do?
Yeah, it's absolutely shameless. I mean, they get completely and utterly exposed time and time and time again, and then they just run to their blog, the Evolution News, and do their damage control pieces where nobody is responding and nobody can leave comments or anything. It's not a broad message. It's for a very specific captured audience that they're trying to hang on to. And they're hoping that audience will grow. I'm not seeing any evidence of it growing. I think they're trying to prevent it from shrinking, and I don't think they're doing that good of a job of it. But as you guys were saying, I think you can do a couple of things. I try to explain with crystal clarity how their claims are false, but because they try to put on this air of being very academic and look, we go to the primary literature and this is what the primary literature says. No, it doesn't. Here's the primary author of that paper stating emphatically that they're lying about the paper. So even if you're somebody that will watch, I try to dumb it down as much as possible, and I think I have a talent for that, to make this science accessible even from the journals themselves. But if it's all just still going like this, here's a quote from the primary author saying they're lying about my paper. That at least is going to leave a mark and make you think twice if you thought that Stephen Meyer or Casey Luskin or Michael Behe or any of these guys are credible sources of information. They're absolutely not. They're complete charlatans.
What do you guys think is the main reason why this is still a thing? I mean, it can be obvious just to say it's religion, but specifically, there have been 15 court cases, including Scopes, in the last century, and every single one has failed, and failed badly. Why is this still a battle? Phil, why don't you give me your quick take first?
Yeah, well, maybe I can get some data on it, because we're obviously interested in science. So there was a survey that Pew did, and I've got the results of it here. Let me see if I can just pull it up. Okay, belief in evolution. Okay, so what we find is that for atheists, it is 95%. And actually 91, humans have evolved over time. But 91% through natural processes. So amazing. I find it amazing, actually, 9% of atheists don't accept that.
That's
That is weird, right? That is a bit weird, but still, it's very high. I mean, that's
9% of people did not understand the question, basically.
maybe. Okay, so now if we go to Christians, what we find is overall, 53% of Christians accept evolution, and only 21% due to natural processes, 29% guided by a supreme being. There's various categories, but the Protestants, it's lower than Christians as a whole, and for evangelicals, it's one of the lowest, although it's 38% for evolution as a whole, and 11% due to natural processes. And Jehovah's Witnesses is actually the lowest, 20%. Evolved over time, 6% due to natural processes. So that's not a coincidence. And we actually see similar data when you look at other scientific topics that sort of align with that sort of identity of Christian right. So if you look at climate change, you'll see very, very similar numbers. Right. So let's look at climate change. Again, atheists, 90% of atheists accept climate change. And the earth is getting warmer mostly because of human activity. Christians as a whole, it's 45%, evangelicals, 32%. So what I think is going on is that this is a question of sort of identity. So in the sense of that's opposed to my worldview, and therefore I'm going to reject it. So we see that's why you get, I think, my personal speculation, why you see this very, very similar pattern. And of course, now I know that not every, we've seen in the data, not every Christian opposes evolution, right? In fact, not even every evangelical opposes evolution. So the question is, well, why? You've got the Catholic Church saying they're okay with evolution. In England, the Anglican Church is perfectly happy. Darwin was buried in Westminster Abbey. I've stood right next to that gravestone. Now, what I think is going on is that, of course, when you're confronted with the text, there are a number of things you could do with it, right? The text sort of denies evolution. So you can either say it's a metaphor, or you can say it's a literal truth and deny the science. So it's not a surprise that at least a decent proportion are going to do the latter. That shouldn't come as a surprise. So I think most of the opposition to evolution comes from the religious right. I mean, no surprise.
Dave, maybe it's because Darwin's our guy in England. We haven't maybe had as much of the challenge, which is why some of this new stuff in Cambridge concerns me a lot. Yep. When I say 15 trials, I mean 15 high-profile American trials. Mm-hmm. Is there a sense in which this is quite a uniquely or explosively American phenomenon?
Perhaps not uniquely, but definitely overwhelmingly, it's occurring here. I think just America is sort of the arena, the geopolitical arena, by which this battle between reality and sort of oligarchical, fascistic, Christian nationalist tendencies has been waged. I mean, it's been going here since, I mean, at least the Reagan administration, Christian nationalists trying to nudge the needle ever closer towards theocracy. The degree to which those perpetuating this agenda and this propaganda themselves believe this evangelical viewpoint, I'm sure some do, some don't. I think it's a vehicle for controlling the masses. Religion has always been an instrument for controlling the masses. So here it's sort of a scapegoat with which to implement this larger agenda, but definitely reality and truth and institutions of higher learning and expertise, these are all enemies when this agenda is being wielded. And so that's why the trials don't stop, because as long as there's potentially a receptive audience for this propaganda, they will continue to try to push it, and they will continue to try to reach this goal of a Christian theocracy and authoritarian rule. in America.
Actually, can I just make an interesting observation that in the UK there's much less creationism than in the US. Not that there's none, there is some, but much less. Now, weirdly though, we don't have separation of church and state. We have a state religion, which is the Anglican Church. Maybe we just got lucky that they're very liberal in their interpretation of the scripture. I mean, we could have got unlucky and they've been a fundamentalist church. But I wonder if in the States, and Dave, maybe you can shed some light on this, because the religions have to compete, the way you compete is often like making noise, and maybe in the UK where the church doesn't have to compete so much, it doesn't have to be so headline grabbing, so controversial. What do you think? Why do you think the reason that we as a country with no separation of church and state don't really have a problem with the creation, where you have separation of church and state and you do have a problem with the creation?
It's a good observation. I mean, I don't think it's due to competition. There's no competition. Christianity is the winner. Second would be Judaism, but Judaism is in the panoply of, in high regards among Christians because it's their, the prequel to their book. So it's hard to say. I mean, I think it's just when Britain. When England handed the torch over to America as the premier global superpower around post-World War II, I think that just along with that came this incredible scrutiny among the elites as the elite powers view America as this battleground, because along with it, and this may not be the case much longer, China may overtake America, or some would argue it already has. But when you have a region that's just sort of the global superpower, sort of the leader of the world type thing, however you want to put it, there's going to be an immense amount of attention towards that region to try and control it. And I think that might be it. I don't think it has to do with the nuance of one church or another church, because I don't think it's like Christianity. It's just the vehicle, right? It's just the excuse. It doesn't have to, you can wield an authoritarian agenda with any religion or even without a religion, right? They've done it. Stalin did it too. So I think it's just the flavor.
Interesting. I want to ask you guys, because I want to get on to how we can win and what more can be done. And you guys are science communicators, and you've also debated and dealt a lot with religious apologists. There are some things that religious apologists say a lot that seem to get traction with their audience and zero traction anywhere else. The first is a vicar. Local vicar remarked to me a few months ago that he has someone in his church who has a PhD in cosmology, and he says that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and the space is only that. I wonder if there's some struggle to understand what a scientist actually is. Is a scientist someone who's got a degree or an advanced degree? Is a scientist someone who's published and contributed to their field? Or is a scientist someone who works actively in science? And how can you avoid nonsensical positions like that?
I think that, well, first of all, what is a scientist? A lot of time when you look up phrases in a dictionary, they often have more than one meaning. So we should always be careful to say it's this one thing. Obviously, it depends on a context. So, but I would generally say that a scientist is someone that's either employed to do science or is publishing in their field. So there are people who are independent. And in fact, in astronomy, in my area, that's one area where amateurs that do actually publish, and they are actually involved in research. But obviously, the fact that you are a scientist, there's always going to be people with fringe views, even if you've got a PhD. So there's no stopping that. What I think is important is, and I don't know how much it's been tried. I know Finland are doing this, but I think it would be great if you could teach critical thinking very early on in schools. So how to distinguish between sort of bunk and science and the scientific method, and how to distinguish between fake news and real news and what's a reliable source. Personally, I think that would be our best strategy. I don't know for sure that would work, but I think that's something we should try.
Dave, do you think it's because these guys think that science is a religion based on authority? So if someone has a degree in science, therefore they are, an authority that should be heard. How does this happen?
Well, yeah, that's the irony of the playbook of Discovery Institute is they are trying to entrench themselves within academia, and Meyer flaunts his Cambridge pedigree, right? So it doesn't really work, right? Pick a lane, right? Our scientists, is it good to have degrees or is it not good? Then they'll criticize me for not having a PhD. So I mean, there's two ways to look at this. I think if you have someone in your personal sphere, you can kind of try to get under their radar, try to help them see the logical fallacies. Okay, you met one alleged cosmologist who says something. How about this, 1 million PhD scientists who say the opposite? If you're going to weigh something here, why don't we go with consensus as much as that word has been politicized? But then because I don't have access to all those people in my personal sphere, my strategy is to just make content, right? If you have Discovery Institute personnel, they put on the suit and they're soft, they're well mannered and, put on this air of like, look how scholarly and academic I am. My strategy is to just expose them for the complete and utter buffoons that they are. Just mock them relentlessly and show everyone how incredibly stupid they are. And then that information can be disseminated through the people who view it into their personal spheres. They can use my content as ammunition. They can translate that however they want tonally to the people in their spheres and say, well, have you considered this? Or what about this? Or the guy who wrote that paper said that he's lying. So what about that? So I'm just kind of here to like put out all of the information and make them look ridiculous. And then I'm hoping that there's that secondary effect of people spreading that in their lives personally.
But I think it works exceptionally well because you've been very, very disruptive. And I truly believe a handful, you don't need an army, a handful of really, really skilled science communicators like yourselves and Simon Dan who do what you do can make a huge, huge difference. But I wonder here, we talk about not knowing what a scientist is. One thing apologists say a lot is, oh, you've got to follow the evidence where it leads. That's what we do. We're intellectually honest. We follow the evidence where it leads, and it leads to our religious beliefs. And yet, when it comes to science, that's exactly what they don't do. Is this an education problem, or do they just not love and respect science enough to follow the evidence where it leads? Phil, I'll start with you.
Well, it's ideology, isn't it? I mean, they can't, So, for example, Dave and I debated this Muslim apologist, Sabur Ahmed, and, he didn't have a problem with some features of evolution. And what I said, okay, let's debate human evolution. Like, do humans and chimps share a common ancestor? Because he said that's the thing that contradicts his worldview. So he just can't accept that, because if he did, then his world would kind of fall apart. And in fact, what's interesting is the way I got into YouTube actually was debating a Muslim apologist called Adam Dean, and he was the Sabur Ahmed of his day. This is a long time ago. I'm old. But there was a weird incident that happened there because he criticized, and so basically what happened was a Muslim cleric. I don't remember his. Let's see if I can remember his name. Oh no, I can't remember his name. But anyway, he wrote an article in the Guardian saying Muslims should accept evolution, and of course he got a lot of backlash. And Adam Dean was the sort of cheerleader for that. He put things on his blog and on YouTube saying, Osama Hussein, that was it. That was his name. Right. So he got a lot of backlash, and so I challenged Adam Dean on this. And we had a back and forth, and eventually he sort of disappeared. He sort of fell off the radar a bit, and very anti-evolution. And then after a bit of time, he appeared trying to host a discussion, should Muslims accept evolution? And then what happened was the other Muslims who were his supporters actually backlashed against him, and he couldn't host the event at the university that he was supposed to have it at. And he eventually sort of abandoned his position and went quite moderate. He was like quite an extremist. So it can be done that you can convince people, but of course you've got ideological inertia, so that's going to make it very, very difficult. But usually you're not trying to convince your interlocutor. What you're trying to do is provide the information that other people who are going to engage in these discussions can have, and use that as ammunition in whatever style of debate that they want.
But that's confusing to me a little bit, because I'll only speak for Christians here, but Christians have Augustine warning people in the 4th century not to interpret Genesis literally. And they have Origen and Jerome and other early church fathers saying that. And then I wrote a paper recently on the people who were religious in the modern evolutionary synthesis. And you've got Ronald Fisher. You've got Theodosius Dobzhansky. You've got not Ernst Mayr. Who was the other one? Sewell Wright. These were religious people who were very, very important. So why not just change your beliefs, especially when a lot of people driving that have a different position?
That's not the agenda, though, right? The agenda is not to be a progressive Christian. It's to push theocratic, regressive theocratic politics. I mean, I like the phrase that you used. What did you say? Ideological inertia. I think that applies to the victims, of propaganda mills like Discovery Institute. I have sympathy for somebody who is ideologically motivated, watches that content, is convinced by their rhetoric, is convinced by their deception, and then goes through life thinking, oh, I'm in the right, but they've been deceived. There's no ideological inertia for Discovery Institute personnel. They are lying. It's not that they didn't interpret the data correctly. They're very maliciously and deliberately distorting data. I mean, to a degree that's very easy to prove. I just did a video last week on Casey Luskin where he's trying to do this whole thing about junk DNA and common ancestry between humans and chimps. And look at this paper. It overturns the 99% similarity in DNA between humans and chimps. It's actually only 85%. But he's lying, and he's taking two different metrics, right? 99% is just either protein coding regions or whole genome with only SNPs, the single nucleotide polymorphisms. And then a completely different metric is raw alignment. And if you look at raw alignment, humans and other humans are only 87% similar. And he took data tables and he cropped out a bunch of it, brought the axis up, right? He cut out the data that proves him wrong, presented the graph, right? And then he gets called out on it and he just put an author's note. Oh, I just did that to make it easier to read and it doesn't contradict me. It's just so easy to expose these guys. And I think that definitely not everybody's ready to see that in their camp. But once you get a few of them, the more intellectually honest people who've been captured by this propaganda and go like, wow, like I don't have to understand any biology to see that he just proved that he took that chart, he cropped out the data that proves him wrong and showed it to me like I'm an idiot. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You cannot unsee that level of manipulation and just pure dishonesty. So I try to highlight that as much as humanly possible. When I do Stephen Meyer and I do all of his crap about Cambrian explosion, I go way into the weeds and I look at all these papers and show all of his comprehensive data. But a lot of people are going to glaze over and go like, oh my God, this is so boring. But table, he butchered the table. You can't come back from that, once you see it. So I focus on that stuff.
Yeah. I work at the University of Reading, and we have a museum in our brand new Health and Life Sciences building with Ediacaran fossils and Cambrian fossils. You can't walk into the museum and come to the conclusion that all animal life began in the Cambrian, right, and there was nothing before it. I don't get it.
Yeah, and similar forms crossing that line, right? There's a few, Dickinsonia and Charnia and stuff that cross that gap. So
we've got both of those in our museum, which is a wonderful place to work. I just walk past it all and then go upstairs to my office. But Dave, I want to highlight something else that I noticed has come up in your debates, certainly yours too, Phil. But it is the ideological capture, but there seems to be some very basic knowledge gaps as well. Undoubtedly, I've noticed that religious apologists on the Christian side, they all copy one another, and they all say the kinds of things that you could only say if you exclusively read creationist and intelligent design stuff and never read the scientific literature at all. So one thing is, this is nothing to do with God. I just think the evidence is lacking. Which I don't. You could only say that if you read creationist stuff exclusively. So, Dave, is this still just not the knowledge isn't breaking through?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, and in fact, Discovery Institute is specifically kind of the source of the most of most of this, right? Everybody, all the idiot creationists are repeating Casey Luskin's bullshit about this 85% thing, because and some of them, I'm sure that some of them really believe it. I'm sure that some of them read it and are like, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm going to repeat it because this is a fact. And they don't read the papers, and they don't read, popular content from me or other science communicators that expose this stuff. But I think it's difficult. That's the problem with something like Discovery Institute, is that they're trying to hide their deception by going after more esoteric science that does require, we can't expect everyone in the general public to have a halfway through undergraduate knowledge of chemistry and biology and genetics and anthropology and all. It's too niche, and it's too much science that they're lying about, that it's easy for them to make it seem legitimate, right? It's no longer this like, why are there still monkeys if humans come from right? That's ridiculous. Like, yes, if you pass 9th grade biology, you should be able to see through that. But then there's this other stuff, niche molecular biology. People don't know this stuff, That's why the science communication exposing this is very important. That's why I do it.
Yeah. Phil, I want to ask you here on the physics front, because I know it's your area of expertise. I was at a talk by a religious apologist a few years ago, and he was rolling through the fine-tuning and Big Bang arguments, which yep. Dave, you'll have seen them come up all the time. They all talk about fine-tuning as if they know what the cosmological constant is. And they speak with a level of authority that they certainly don't have. But I remember hearing this guy give 5 reasons for the existence of God, and he was deep into talking about fine-tuning. And I could tell you've watched a William Lane Craig video, and that's the full extent of your knowledge on this. Yep. So what can we do about that?
Well, one thing we just did was publish a survey, and that shows what physicists actually think about fine-tuning. And they are completely unsympathetic to it. In fact, we gave them a bunch of different possible explanations for fine-tuning. So one was that it was brute facts that need no further explanation, so you don't have to appeal to God or a multiverse. So that was option 1. Option 2 was that it was sort of anthropic selection in a multiverse. So what that means is there's lots of universes, and we're going to be in the one that has the life-emitting values. Another was that the constant nature are constants. They couldn't be different to what they are. There's no meaning to say what's the probability of them being something else, because they just couldn't be different. Another was a Darwinian process, actually, because we can actually use the principles of evolution in the cosmos. And the other one was intelligent design. That was the options I can remember anyway. So believe it or not, the most popular choice for any individual answer was it's brute facts that need no further explanation. So physicists don't even, well, let's put it this way, they're much less sympathetic to the notion of fine-tuning than has been presented. So now we can actually say what actual physicists think. So what I did also was make a film on fine-tuning, where I got the scientists that they actually quote, like Roger Penrose, like Alan Guth, and actually put it to them. And what you can see is that they don't support these notions. And the next most popular answer was the multiverse on our survey. But even like a more obscure answer, like the Darwinian solution to fine-tuning, was far more popular than the intelligent design. So I think intelligent design got 3%. So, and we're going to do a bigger survey, actually. So we'll see. That will be less elite scientists. So there may be differences there. But I'm reasonably confident intelligent design will not come out on top. So like Stephen Meyer's saying, like, physicists are now convinced about, they're getting much more sympathetic to God. Well, we've actually got the data that says that's not true. Yeah. So I think that's one thing we can do, and but of course, you can only do so much.
Yeah, Dave, I hear this a lot intelligent design has never been hotter, and evolutionary biologists are leaving evolution in droves. It's, I saw Stephen Meyer's end of year address. There's never been a better year for intelligent design, and I have never ever been in a context, either at university or in scientific work, where intelligent design's even been mentioned once. So why are people so ready to believe that evolution is dead, basically, or that the science overwhelmingly points in that direction?
It's part of the propaganda. I mean, it just reeks of I'm the most handsome boy in school. My mom told me so. It's just complete delusion, just completely fabricated alternate reality, just trying to bolster themselves. It's just pumping up their chest for their delusional followers, right? They want to project this kind of bravado for their followers. But I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what else to say about it. It's just absurd, right? We just continue to show them that this is all completely ridiculous. And then to the previous point, with cosmology in particular, I think another strategy, like, yes, absolutely show them that they're completely lying about the consensus of the physics community. But also, since it's true that the origin of the universe is not completely understood, and that is a gap where you can still wedge a god in there if you are so ideologically inclined, it's important, I think, to demarcate that and say, look, if you want to believe that a God created the universe and that explains the raw parameters of the universe, go ahead. It's not scientific. It's purely philosophical. You're entitled to that belief that we cannot empirically disprove, but recognize that it is unique among the talking points of somebody like Discovery Institute. Everything else they say is just so objectively false and easily disproved, and here's how we can disprove it. So go ahead and believe in this God that you want to believe in, but it has nothing to do with origin of life research or evolutionary biology, molecular biology, any of this stuff. So go with that and then reject all of this. That's fine.
So one thing I just add is that molecular biology is really complicated. So it's very easy to bamboozle people by dropping lots of scientific terms, and so that sounds convincing. Whenever you drop sciencey sounding language, it sounds convincing. So one of the big fights I had with a very popular apologist called William Lane Craig, and he was presented with an argument against God that sort of relied on the suffering of animals, and he dropped this comment that, oh, animals are not aware of their pain because they don't have a prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is where you do self-awareness. So self-awareness doesn't exist in these other animals, so they're not aware that they're in pain. Now, you drop that in a debate. He was debating a philosopher. And of course, that philosopher, is not his area of speciality isn't neuroscience. So very hard to push back there and then, And I did a bunch of videos and even published some papers on this, saying how wrong it was, because...
You're gonna tell me other primates don't have a prefrontal cortex? Get the fuck out of here. Absolutely not.
Right. But also we found a patient, this was the fun bit, we found a patient that didn't have a prefrontal cortex and my colleagues tested his self-awareness and found that it was perfectly intact. So the claim that you need the prefrontal cortex to have the self-awareness was demonstrably false. And then follow-up studies tested his pain perception and showed that actually it was worse than what's normal. But the point is, at that moment in that debate, and I was in the audience of that debate, you drop that term, prefrontal cortex, and suddenly you sound like an expert, right? He quoted Michael Murray to support this, and he said, published by Oxford University Press. And that's a common trick, Sabor Ahmed does this a lot, published, but this is a publishing company, it's owned by the university. They do have peer review in a university publisher, but that doesn't make it true, so you're kind of lending the weight, like it sounds like the whole of the university is endorsing this view.
The chair of the department at Oxford is,
when in reality it's one author and maybe one or two reviewers have sort of said, okay. And those reviewers actually would have been philosophers probably, not neuroscientists, because it was a philosophy book. So unlikely they would have had neuroscientists review a philosophy book. But these are the tricks. These are the tricks of the trade. You know, you drop a sciencey sounding term, you drop a university press, and suddenly it all sounds very, very impressive.
Yeah, it's language games. There's so many language games. There are terms that come up that I only ever hear from apologists, like macroevolution versus microevolution. I've never been in a scientific context where that's ever been said. The young Earth folks talk about historical science. Oh, there's the difference between historical science and other sciences, and the ID guys are using the term specified complexity a lot. To sort of do things that I've never heard in a scientific context.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to find it in an information textbook.
No, and there's
it doesn't mean anything.
it's not just the language; it's death by analogy. I mean, you've done a lot of good stuff on this, Dave, but the ID guys in particular, it's death by 1,000 bad analogies. How do we combat the language and the magician's tricks of just throwing a lot of technical words, names, and analogies, and hopefully that's going to tie you in knots or distract you? How do you fight that?
You just pick it apart very meticulously. You just pick it apart and it just show how the analogy is fallacious. I mean, I don't know any other way to do it, but yeah, all those, tornado through a junkyard, this kind of crap, like it's just so tired. And you just deconstruct it as clearly and succinctly as possible. I mean, everybody can have their turn, right? Every psychomer can have their turn, and however each one does it, you'll show a few people how fallacious it is. But
yeah.
I should add just one thing.
Sure.
If you want a magician's trick to become a lot less impressive, show how the trick is done.
Right.
Right.
Which you're both very good at. I've seen your recent content on this, Dave, has been outstanding. I've pointed some people in its direction. Phil, when you mentioned multiverse, it reminded me of another trick that comes up, and I'd be interested to get both your takes on this. Is the idea that evolution is an ideology that we just want to believe? It is a powerful one that is driven. It's painted as, religion X versus evolution as an ideology, as a belief system. And the irony is just dripping off everything here. Like, you just want to believe this. So your worldview means you have to look at this and you can't look at the evidence objectively. How do you fight that? The idea that evolution is a religious belief that materialists just want to hold on to.
Well, one thing I did when I debated Sabor Ahmed was he said, well, look, you as a materialist, you have to believe in Darwinian evolution. There's no way out of that. And I pointed out, no, we don't, because actually, there were people believed in spontaneous creation before evolution. Now, I don't take spontaneous creation seriously, but logically, it's perfectly consistent with the materialist worldview. So you don't, and of course, you could have other forms of evolution, like Lamarckian evolution. So you don't have to believe in any evolution. You could believe in spontaneous creation, and materialists did believe in that. Not all of them, but I mean, it's a consistent view. And then there are other forms of evolution that we've rejected that are perfectly consistent with a sort of atheistic worldview. And then you can point out that there's plenty of churches and other religious institutions that don't have a problem with evolution. So just for example, when I was, my wife is American and her family are from Kentucky. So if I go over there and the topic of evolution's come up, and it has come up, I generally steer away from talking about religion because they're pretty religious.
Yeah, Kentucky is pretty.
Yeah, mostly, right? That's the location of the Creation Museum. So,
oh gosh, yeah.
So what I did in that case, I wasn't going to sort of drop 5 different pieces of evidence for evolution. I just said, they were Catholic. I just said, look, the Catholic Church endorses evolution. And that's going to be much more effective than, this gene has blah, 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 blah. That's not going to work, right? So you have to know your audience and know who's at the other end of that dialogue, and use the appropriate tools. Now, of course, what Dave does and what I do, that's more you know, look, here's the information, you use it as you want. You know, Dave has a very aggressive tone, and that's good in many cases. Obviously, though, if you're having a discussion with your aunt and you use that tone, it's obviously a terrible, terrible thing to do. You know, Dave can do it because, you know, it's in
I'm
a
doing it out
context.
into the ether, right? I'm just kind of
Yeah,
spreading.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Dave,
But
when
I
people
mean,
get, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, in general, I mean, this science is belief system thing. You can help people understand that it's absolutely not a belief system. Science has never been and will never be a belief system. But as it pertains to evolution in general, I try to help people understand that we observe evolution, right? It's not this speculative thing. We observe it every day. We have observed speciation events, right? We have observed all of these things. And then once you can get people on board with that, and then they'll say that's when you get the whole, okay, micro, but not macro. Then you have the more difficult task of helping them understand the biological processes by which large-scale change can occur. So most people don't know about macromutations. They don't know about gene duplication and neofunctionalization. They don't know about all of these different ways where very large phenotypic change can occur and then be cemented by natural selection. So it's just about, I mean, you just got to come at it from every angle, essentially.
Dave, I want to get your thoughts on a strange experience I had when the Creation Museum, Ken Ham's new Noah's Ark one. You've seen the Noah's Ark one that he built, over $100 million.
I mean, I'm aware of it, but yeah, I haven't.
I took their virtual tour when I started, and you don't have to get that far into it before you get to two things I found very, very curious. Firstly, there was a animatronic velociraptor pen where Noah and his family kept their velociraptors. You've got a figure of a person feeding these velociraptors in the animal pen. I don't know where they get that from, but then you turn the corner and you get to a blacksmith's forge where Noah and his family built their armor. I mean, long before the Iron Age, before the Bronze Age. And I just think, where are you getting this from? Because you're not getting this from the Bible. You have to have such a strange disconnect from reality. But they have this these notes on each section, which is, here's the Bible view, and here's the atheist materialist view, and it's phrased as two views. And there's this skew, this like cosmic warfare battle going on, and science is the battleground. That's deep ideological capture. If someone's gone that deep, and particularly I've seen flat Earth, young Earth creationism is becoming a thing, which is why I worry this is going to get worse. When someone's that deep in the ideological capture, do you just have to kind of throw everything and see what happens?
Well, you have to be satisfied that you will not have 100% success, right? We're aiming for 10% success or something. You know, you want to convert as many as you can, but yeah, there's people who just are absolute brick wall, and it's not going to happen, right? Until they're ready for it to happen, which is going to occur via some internal metamorphosis. It's, factual information is not going to do the trick. So, yeah.
You've had a lot more success than anyone I've come across, Dave. Do you put a lot of that down to, what's the biggest thing you put that down to?
Maybe just, I feel like I do have a solid ability to relay these ideas with clarity. I mean, I have a lot of practice, right? I taught organic chemistry, right? My goal is to make relatively complex concepts easy to understand to ideally any layperson, but at the very least someone with high school level competency in these areas. It should be made as clear as possible. So that's definitely my goal, to dumb it down as much as possible. That, and perhaps just the acerbic quality to it. Maybe there's a bit of drama, and that helps the clicks, and so I get more views that way. Whatever's going to get the message out, I'm here for it. So, but yeah, just doing my best. And I'm not sure.
Phil, I want to get some data in here, and I want to get your take on this, because I did a bit of homework earlier this year for an article I wrote for the Free Thinker. I'll just point out the Free Thinker's interview with Dave was published yesterday, so people can check that out at the Free Thinker, the oldest atheist publication on the planet. So the Discovery Institute guys like to claim that the latest science points to intelligent design, not evolution, not the things you've written about, all of that. I went through the last 10 years of Nobel Prizes and just had a quick look at what some of these Nobel Prizes were awarded for. And I did a search of each of these on biocomplexity, the in-house journal, if you could call it that, of intelligent design, and on Evolution News, their main outlet. For CRISPR-Cas9, you have a grand total of 3 mentions in Evolution News and 0 on biocomplexity. Nobel Prize, changing the game, going to transform the future. Yeah, you guys know CRISPR very well, I'm sure, both of you. Base editing and prime editing, 2 other advanced gene editing technologies that may get a Nobel Prize in the coming years, also yielded 0 results for both. Immunotherapy, cancer immunotherapy, the dream we've all been waiting for, gets a grand total of 3 mentions. Not like full-on article, just mentions on Evolution News and 0 on biocomplexity. I'm just going to spoil it now and say biocomplexity has 0 results for all of these. Cryo-electron microscopy, Nobel Prize awarded for it 7 years ago. 0 in biocomplexity, 3 mentions on Evolution News. AlphaFold, which I use every week in my job, Nobel Prize awarded in December. 4 mentions in Evolution News, 0 in biocomplexity. And click chemistry, which K. Barry Sharpless won his 2nd Nobel Prize for just a few years ago, got 0 mentions on both. So apparently the latest science is pointing to intelligent design and away from evolution. It doesn't appear that the intelligent design people even know what the latest science is. And I'm not just talking general science that's growing or on the frontiers. We're talking Nobel Prize winning science of the last decade. That's a staggering claim and a staggering level of ignorance. How can you shine a light on and get people excited about science while also untying people? Phil, give me your best answer.
Well, I think the best way to get people excited about science is to show that it's a process of discovery, that, and this is where we may conflict with our goal of showing what we've already discovered, right? Because people get excited, like what were the big news stories that got people really excited about science? Let's take, for example, the discovery of the Higgs boson, right? That got huge headlines everywhere, way more, than anything in molecular biology, probably. Why? Because it's new knowledge. We've discovered something incredibly exciting and new. So we have to keep doing that. We have to push the frontiers of our knowledge and communicate that to the public. And my biggest worry at the moment is that the current US government is cancelling project after project. Their proposed budget for NASA is cut. I mean, even like telescopes that are built and ready to launch, just a few like last minute checks and things have to be done. They're proposing to cancel. So this will be very detrimental to engaging people with science. But I think that's so other countries will have to pick up what's happening in the States. So I hope the European Space Agency and the Chinese and the Indians will pick up the mantle and say, or pick up the torch, I should say, and say, okay, we're going to do this research and we're going to engage the public and we're going to make these incredible discoveries. And that is what I think is the most likely to engage people in science. And also there's a need, so for example, in the 1960s, there was a big push in the US to teach science. Why? Because it was felt that the Americans were falling behind their Soviet rivals. So when the Soviets launched Sputnik, when they had the first human being in space, it was a very pressing problem for the American population that they felt we're falling behind and this is going to cost us. So maybe appealing to people's best interests, like science is where innovation happens. So if you have a community of scientists, then there are spin-offs as well. You get technologies coming out of that. and those are going to drive your economy. And in fact, what's very interesting is that whilst the US is cutting science budgets, Saudi Arabia are actually trying to massively increase it. I don't think they might struggle to get a lot of scientists going over there, but we'll see what happens. But I think, realize that knowledge is power, knowledge is economic growth. And so you can appeal to people's best interests, and maybe that would be a good strategy.
Yeah, and China puts out 5 times the number of engineers every year that the US does. I mean, if Dave, maybe I'm too optimistic here, but I always felt that if we land humans on the moon again, or if we land them on Mars, it will have that Apollo effect and get people loving science again and driving in. But am I being too optimistic there?
It could, but it's not new enough. I mean, I honestly, I want to put a lot of blame on popular media that has done this probably without malice, but just sort of in going, with the advent of the internet and the new way of disseminating news, popular media, when covering science topics, just slowly went that clickbait route. And then you started seeing everything is just everything we know about physics is wrong. This new blah, 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 all that stuff. And it just so thoroughly diluted the appetite for actual journalism on scientific topics that now it just has this effect where people don't even know what's happening, right? No, as you guys were saying, like they don't know about click chemistry and CRISPR. I mean, I think some people know about CRISPR, but they just don't know what's happening. They genuinely don't know what's happening. And so then they become captured by outlets that purport to tell them what's happening when they're really just spewing kind of anti-establishment, anti-academia rhetoric. So, I mean, they're definitely, it just comes down to freelancers, right? Freelance science communicators on YouTube can provide this role. I actually don't really do it. I don't really comment on current science news often. Sometimes I do, but there are others who do it very well. But that's kind of where people have to go now. Luckily, there are some popular ones, but then there are ones who pretend to do that. I just have been exposing Sabine Hassenfelder lately for being a complete fraud, but that's kind of the role that she pretends to provide the public. So it's hard. It's a minefield out there. People don't know where to go for science news. They don't know who to trust, and that's problematic.
Yeah, before you need to go, I want to ask you about that, Dave, because you've yeah, not only Sabine Hossenfelder, who's one of the key speakers at the How the Light Gets In festival, a very prestigious one here in the UK by the Institute for Art and Ideas, who I've actually written for, but 2 guests last year on the IAI festival were Richard Dawkins and Dennis Noble. And yeah, you're already laughing, Phil, because you probably know where I'm going with this. You found this first, in your face, Dave, when you had your recent debate, that science communication we've been talking about as being part of the answer here, but is it also part of the problem? When you're debating an evolutionist, they're not quoting current evolutionary biologists or the world-leading evolutionary biologists. The Nobel
anti-evolutionist, Sam. You said evolutionist. You meant anti-evolutionist.
Sorry, yes. The Nobel Prize, like the biggest prize in science, was given 3 years ago to Svante Pääbo for sequencing the Neanderthal genome. That's the biggest, most significant prize ever given in the history of evolutionary biology. And you're not going to be debating people who know who he is or what he's done. They're going to be talking about Richard Dawkins and now Dennis Noble, and because they think that's what evolutionary biology is. So is science communication part of the problem here? As well. I know you've been very active, Dave, in trying to get more scientists to speak up. Tell us about the hope you've got wrapped up in that and how we can do it better.
I mean, that's the million-dollar question. I don't know how to solve this problem. I think that you want to identify the bad faith actors and expose them. That's kind of the main thing that I focus on, and I want to make a very convincing, compelling case. Sabine is the only figure where it took time. I had pushback where people at first they didn't want to hear it, whereas now she's exposed herself so thoroughly by coming out in support of Eric Weinstein. I think most people now are pretty on board with her agenda. But then, I think the Dawkins and Noble thing was pretty delicate, particularly because Noble's not like Sabina. I feel like it's very clear that Sabina is peddling a fascist propaganda for cash. Noble's not doing that. Noble, I think, is just was a legitimate scientist in his twilight years, has kind of gotten a touch of the Nobelitis, however you want to say it. And is getting a little fringe through ego, and then has been co-opted by Templeton and Christian nationalists. And he is not explicitly, he is not one of those people, but I don't think that the Noble thing made as big a wave as they intended, the whole third way thing, but it was worthy of exposing and showing that Noble is just flat out wrong. He's just wrong. And so if anyone hasn't seen my video on that, I do have a very lengthy video deconstructing all of his claims. But yeah,
it was very important to do that. And Phil, I'll put this to you. Like I've had conversations with religious apologists who frequently say, "Oh, did you know there was a 2016 Nobel a meeting at the Royal Society where you got that too?" And I want you to help me here. What can I do? Because I'm an ambassador for the Genetics Society, and I'm an associate member of the Royal Society of Biology. We have conferences every year on evolutionary biology. I go to them. Svante Pablo is our key speaker this autumn at it. But at these conferences, you get maybe 200 people, and no one hears about it. The same with the Royal Society of Biology. We have these conferences all the time, and they're not well known about, and the publications don't go far. The communication's not hot. We're clearly missing something on our side. What can we do better, Phil?
Well, it's sort of heads I win, tails you lose. Because suppose that these third way people weren't given any voice to speak their opinions, then it would be, oh, look, the scientific community is suppressing opinion. Whereas if they did give them a stage, then it's like, oh, look, legitimate science. The thing is, I think one thing we can do is point out how science is done and what is established and what is not established. So the fact that, someone like Dennis Noble is given a platform at the Royal Society does not mean that his views are accepted. Simple things like check citation counts. What are the key pieces of literature that are cited? So, and what I try to do when I've debated creationists, particularly on the evolution front, is focus on the thing that I think they most care about, which is not so much the details of molecular biology, but really, do humans and chimps share a common ancestor? And there, all the scientists' names that they drop, they don't dispute that humans and chimps share a common ancestor. So even if they think epigenetics is much more important than what most evolutionary biologists would say it is, so what? None of that changes the thing that they care about, the humans and chimps. And that's where we have even much broader consensus. I mean, I think there's a broad consensus for the other stuff too. But, I think you can short circuit their approach by focusing on that, because one, that's the thing they care about most, and two, it's the thing that it's just so overwhelming, and all the sort of epigeneticists that they quote don't dispute, not for a second.
Dave, anything to add?
No, that's brilliant. Yeah, pretty much it.
Okay, so Dave, tell us where people can find more about you and what you're up to at the moment.
Professor Dave Explains on YouTube, and I've really been ramping up the debunks lately. I'm just kind of tearing through them. I just put out one today on Avi Loeb that has been getting some good solid viewership already. So pretty happy about that.
Excellent. And Phil, where can people find out more about you and your book, and what are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, so you go on YouTube, just type in Phil Halper. You should find the channel. And the book is The Battle of the Big Bang, and it's from University of Chicago Press. You can get it on Amazon or any of your good bookshops. And future projects, I want to do something on consciousness. So that's an area that I think that a lot of the religious apologists are moving into. So I may do something on that, but we'll see.
Yeah. Dave, are you going to write a book anytime?
I wrote a book and didn't sell too much, so probably won't do another.
Okay. Brilliant.
I got my author title. That's all I did it for.
Brilliant. Well, Gentlemen, thank you so much. I know there's a lot more we could talk about and unravel, but it's a deep pit, and you're both doing excellent work, and hopefully we can get people at greater levels, loving science, loving truth, loving reality. Keep up the fine work. Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. It's been great
Thanks
to
for
be
having
on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more amazing conversations with incredible researchers who are changing the world we live in and driving humanity forward. Feel free to check out my Instagram at polymath_Sam or go to my website at www.sam-mckee.co.uk.